Hello and welcome to the IntraFish Seafood Investor Forum. Thank you all so much for being here. It is going to be a fantastic couple of days of wonderful speakers and panelists, and we have so much to cover. And it should be a fantastic event. So first off, thank you to all the panelists who've joined us from all around the world. Thank you to our sponsor, Antarctica Advisors. You're going to be hearing from Ignacio Kleiman of Antarctica tomorrow at our M&A panel discussion. So this is our 15th IntraFish Seafood Investor Forum. It's very different. Obviously, our lives are radically different. Normally, we would be in New York or in London. We would be talking in person. We'd be able to shake hands, make connections. But that's not the world we live in right now. But on it goes. And the seafood industry continues to consolidate, continues to grow, and the outlook is very, very bright. So the commonality that we have today is we all have a shared passion for the seafood sector, and we have some of the most prominent experts joining us today that are going to really shed some light on where the sector's going. And what we can expect in the years to come. So we are going to start off today with our land-based aquaculture panel and go from there. We're going to keep things moving today. We know how busy everyone is. We know that everyone certainly has some webinar fatigue after all these months. So we're going to keep things at a clip. What that means is that our speakers, if you'd like to know more about them, you can go to intrafishevents.com. You can read their bios and learn a bit more about them. But in the interest of time, we're going to keep things on a good clip. Now, after this first panel, we are going to have a quick 5-minute break, allow you to get a coffee, come back and join us. And then at the end of the day, we'll wrap things up. And you'll get a second reminder tomorrow if you're going to be joining us then. To join the event. So please do stay with us and please join us tomorrow because, again, fantastic speakers. So I'm going to introduce my colleague Demi Korban. She's a business reporter in London and she will be moderating the land-based aquaculture panel. Certainly there's no hotter topic right now in the seafood sector, something that at IntraFish we spend a lot of ink on, that's for sure. And we have a great lineup of guests. Demi, if you want to go ahead and turn on your camera and your mic, you can go ahead and introduce our panelists and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Drew. So yeah, as Drew mentioned, this is the first panel, the land-based revolution. So before we kick this off, some housekeeping. You can file any questions you want and we'll follow up with those later through the toggle on the right. So very quickly, I'd like to introduce our panelists, if they can all turn on their webcams as well. We've got Kolbjorn Giskeodegaard, CFO and co-founder of Columbi Salmon. We've got Sylvia Wulf, President and CEO of AquaBounty Technologies, Jordi Trias, President of Stolt Sea Farms, and Ohad Maiman, the CEO of the Kingfish company. So we're just waiting on Ohad, but since he's not here yet,
I thought I was on.
There we go. Hi, Ohad. So I'm going to start kicking this off with you, Kolbjorn. You've been studying conventional salmon farming for a long time as an analyst with Nordea Markets. Why did you decide to jump into the land-based salmon farming segment with your firm, Columbi Salmon?
I think I've been following, as you say, the sector for a long time. And in the past 2-3 years, it has been, I would say, most of the innovative work has been related to land-based salmon farming. That's where the strong evolution is happening, the strong development. It's moving very quickly forward, and it kind of fascinates me. And when I was offered the opportunity together with other good friends and colleagues to join Columbi Salmon, it was an easy choice for me.
Sure. Shifting to you, Jordi. So you have a longer experience with land-based aquaculture, surely not with salmon, but with several operations around the world producing both turbot and sole. What do you think about the current excitement for this technology, and what are the main challenges in terms of getting to profitability?
Sure, we're really happy about this excitement. No? We've been farming land-based for more than 35 years and in recirculation for more than 20. So we really welcome this, call it boom, no, of companies and new species jumping into land-based. This is a moment for probably most of those companies testing, learning, then going for scale up. What I expect is a lot of innovation to come from this boom, no? To a lot of new ways of doing what we have been doing profitably for the last 3 decades. So we're very excited and really looking forward to seeing what comes ahead. As to the challenges, I believe there's obviously the biological challenges, no? and the need to keep cost control and the need to keep security or biological safety. But I think there's a big challenge in people, no? in having enough talent available for this big growth that we're experiencing and we are seeing. And I think that's where we should be focusing a lot of the efforts to convince more and more people to come into the aquaculture industry, because it's a fantastic one, but we're going to be needing more hands.
Okay, let's hold that thought for a while. I'm going to come back to the issue of expertise in the field, but shifting to location. So location is something that we're all considering with land-based aquaculture. So Sylvia, you already have farms in Indiana and Rollo Bay, and you've recently announced Mayfield, Kentucky as the next location for producing GM salmon. So what is basically the premise to choosing those locations? Is it regulations? Is it market readiness? What do you look at?
The way that we think about it is aquaculture is really the next phase of agriculture when you think about the ability to do it in a land-based system. And when you also consider the circular economy, you know, the two components are what do you do to make sure that you've got access to quality and quantity of water, which the Midwest really allows us to do. And the second is the utilization of your waste streams. And so you're in an agricultural area. So we believe that re-stimulating the rural economy is a key component of our business proposition. And so that's why we really like the Midwest. And the fact that you can place these farms anywhere that you've got access to good logistics, water quality and quantity, and key labor.
Kolbjorn, what's your thought on that for choosing Belgium for Columbi salmon?
I think Belgium was a very, or northern France / Belgium, it's a little bit coincidental which side of the border we actually ended up at, but in Ostende, we found a business climate that was very welcoming for us. We are located in the middle of Ostende Science Park with a lot of research institutions. There's a lot strong focus on sustainability, and that's sort of the important thing for us. I mean, in our location, within the same day, you can in theory reach 25% of the global consumers of salmon by truck. So I think short travel food with no impact on the external environment and improved fish health is key for us. And Belgium is a very good, Ostende is a very good location for our first setup.
Sure. If we focus a bit more now into financing. So Ohad, you recently successfully raised capital for the Kingfish company in a private placement, and you also listed on Oslo Small Cap, which is now called Euronext Growth. Why did you go public at this stage instead of earlier? What's the rationale behind it, and why did you choose Oslo in particular?
Well, I think for us it was quite important first to feel comfortable with the proof of concept. When we started 5 years ago, the typical questions in presentations to investors were fairly quite basic. Can we build those systems? Will they work? Will the fish taste good? The moment we've been able to tick the box on these questions and be quite satisfied with both our above design level outputs and the quality of the product, and then we turned our sights to scale. and development of the same business case as we do in Europe for replacement of imports to develop that to the US market as well. The choice of the public listing was mostly about efficiency and the potential for efficient fundraising moving forward. We think there is some excitement around this sector and that we are well positioned to take part in the scale up of first movers. And we've seen generally the attitude in the Oslo Stock Exchange rather than other exchanges to be quite supportive of this trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Kolbjorn, what do you think about the gold rush of IPOs on the Oslo Stock Exchange? Given that you've studied the salmon segment the most, so where do you see Oslo as the correct place to list?
Absolutely. We've had this debate for 2 decades, I guess. We had the same debate back in 2008-9 when we were main lister for Bakkafrost. For them, it was natural to think about Copenhagen, and we said, well, hey, you have to go to Oslo because there you have the analysts, you have the investors that are skilled, that are trained, that knows this sector, knows the dynamics, and you will have attention. And I think it's exactly the same dynamics now. Oslo is the marketplace for seafood companies in the world, and obviously, I mean, I think you had more listings on the Oslo Small Cap Exchange so far this year than any other stock exchanges in Europe in total. So of course it has been an extreme period in Oslo, but I think it's both for renewable energy, for sustainable focuses, companies focusing on sustainability, but also seafood, which is of course the industry focused here. It's a good marketplace, and yes, it has been a rush, but it also proves that Oslo is an attractive marketplace and an attractive arena for listing and for gaining access to the capital markets.
Jordi, Stolt Sea Farms is listed in a London Stock Exchange. Have you ever thought of moving and listing in Oslo instead, or also listing in Oslo?
Well, actually, Stolt Nielsen is listed in Oslo, so it's a different type of setup. Well, that's a question for our shareholders, right? In our case, we'll focus on running the business, and as to the types of ways to approach this type of investments, I think I continue to believe the best thing is to have a proven business model, a proven market opportunity, and a proven technical model, and then financing follows, right? So no worries about that, I would say.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the projects won't get there without the correct financing, and certainly maybe even equity financing to kick off. So what is the case, Sylvia, for investing in land-based salmon, and what do you see as the correct route to go? Is it private equity? Is it IPOing?
Again, I agree with Jordi. I think that it really depends on your business model and where you want to locate as to what your financing strategy needs to look like. You know, IPOs are certainly a way to fund a business where we're public. You know, we did an equity raise in August to begin the project financing for the next farm. And I think all of those are viable options. I think it has to be your financing has to be part of your business plan to make sure that you are in fact understanding what your capital requirements are going to be and your capital structure, what the most attractive capital structure is going to look like. So I think it varies from firm to firm. In terms of land-based, I think that, you know, we're in the early stages. From my perspective, there's tremendous opportunity to enhance and reduce the CapEx, which is incredibly expensive right now. But with any startup technology, that's typically the case. So I think now is the time because the costs will come down, and those investors are going to reap the benefits of that as those business mechanics or components improve over time.
Surely it is early stage for many of those firms, but then there are a lot of risks given water, oxygen, access to expertise, etc. So Kolbjorn, do you think it's too early to IPO, particularly investors also get to see those failures quarter to quarter and even react to accidents as they happen?
I think I agree with Sylvia. It's depending. It can vary from case to case. For some cases, it would be right to go with a private equity or with other investors, hold it privately for some years, testing out, etc. For other projects, an early IPO would be the right pace. Gives you also more access to more diversified capital sources. So I think it has its pros and cons regardless of what you choose. I think if you should wait to list till all kind of technologies are fully proven, I think there will be not many companies listed at all. So I think investors need to take some risk, and it should be reflected also in the price that they get when they invest in this in an IPO.
Surely. And one of the things that Jordi already mentioned is that hasn't disappeared, obviously, is the manpower bottleneck. So how do you think that can be solved? And is it moving fast enough? Ohad, with your experience, how have you seen that moving forward?
I think it was quite helpful for us both in the Netherlands from day one and now in the US to collaborate with universities locally that have an aquaculture program. There aren't too many of those, but there's already quite a few advanced ones with small RAS facilities and part of the aquaculture program looking into this sector. We've complemented that with in-house training. So our shift managers constantly train shift manager or future shift managers. And we are now starting to train US personnel at our Dutch operation towards the build out there. So I think it's a combination of the higher the profile of the sector gets, the more educational institutions look to facilitate and support the growth of it. But there's also quite some work for the operators to train personnel on the job.
Jordi, since you've been operating in the segment for quite some decades, have you seen that recently you've been able to attract even more expertise as the salmon segment gets more attraction?
Well, where we are located and most of our sites are located, it's mostly Southern Europe, so we've not really felt that. What we've seen is that more and more we're convincing more people to come into the industry, and we also, like Ohad was mentioning, we're also in direct contact with universities, with specific schools for aquaculture. In the end, what we've seen is the need to anticipate. If you anticipate and you see that you're going to be needing people in 2-3 years because you're building up a site, start training, start from scratch. Don't wait until the last moment. Because it's not only about the technical skills, it's also about the company culture. It's also about understanding how you operate. It's also about specifics of your specific company. So we've not had any problems recruiting. On the contrary, now going further and going forward, I believe there's going to be a lot of competition out there.
And then if we talk a bit about coronavirus, so obviously it has disrupted many things. It may even have disrupted projects going forward with construction. But there has been disruption in the traditional value chain, such as freight, tariffs, distribution costs. Do you think that coronavirus, Kolbjorn, has sort of given land-based an advantage in those recent days?
Yeah, I think when we saw the first impact of the first wave of coronavirus back in February, March, April, my first initial thought was that, okay, this is really going to strengthen the investment case. But in the short term, I feared that it would erase investors' ability to participate in the project and provide a short-term setback. I was wrong with the latter, but I hope I'm right with the first. And I think it has strengthened the investment case simply because, as you mentioned, the long global complex supply chains has been disrupted, and I think it has been an eye-opener to the value of local food production regardless of sector. So in that sense, I think establishing land-based farms near the consumer has sort of the case there has been strengthened with Corona. Absolutely.
What's your thought on that, Sylvia?
I agree. I think that the fragility of our supply chains was exposed with COVID, and domestic production in areas where they've typically been very large net importers creates a real opportunity to be able to, fill that gap with domestic production. And again, you're reducing your carbon footprint. There's lots of benefits from a sustainability perspective, as well as, a strong supply chain perspective. And I think, for the seafood industry at large, it provides access and affordability to a greater consumer base. And I can speak about the United States. We don't consume anywhere near the amount of seafood that Europeans do. With domestic production and accessibility, I think that we can be at a pivot point there, and we can begin to tap into the desire to eat protein and switch from land-based to seafood with this type of a technology.
Sylvia, you mentioned carbon footprint, but ESG is a focus with many investors, and some conventional salmon farmers might say that carbon footprint of power is criticized with land-based salmon. So what's your argument there?
I think that, again, for me, it's about increasing seafood consumption globally. And I think we need all forms of production to be able to do that. And so I don't criticize, I just think that it's going to supplement and augment what's already taking place and do it in a way that, is close to consumers. So again, you've got a stronger supply chain. Yes, there may be a sustainability play there, but for me, it's really about providing access and affordability to increase seafood consumption is the real opportunity that I think we're all wanting to see come to fruition.
Ohad, what's your experience with that argument in terms of carbon footprint and ESG?
Well, actually, in the Netherlands, we operate on 100% renewable energy, so we wanted to tackle that aspect as well. In Maine, we are planning to have quite a roof footprint of solar panels. However, not sure if we can reach 100% renewable bases. That said, we've noticed that land-based farms can encourage renewable energy development because we use pretty much steady state energy year-round, day and night, and can be quite an ideal off-taker to such initiatives. I think that's an important part. About the effect of COVID, up until recently, it was mostly touted as a way to reduce carbon footprint by eliminating imports. That's still a valid argument, I believe, but a combination of food security, well, I hope that pandemics are not a recurring occurrence, has brought this into focus. And I think the result of what we see now is that new clients that we have taken on during COVID are for the first time appreciating the difference of quality when the fish you receive is 1 or 2 days from harvest versus 5 or 7. And all together, I believe are creating quite a positive outlook for RAS. And in particular, maybe the last point there is that RAS takes time. So developments that are fundraising today will see fish in 2 to 3 years if all goes well, which by all, well, hopefully is way beyond the timeline affected by COVID.
Certainly, you mentioned that RAS takes time. And one other particular thing that we look at when we discuss sustainability is feed. So we see some feed manufacturers already placing a lot of efforts into developing RAS-specific diets, and some land-based farmers also inking agreements for those. But without a new facility specific for those RAS diets, is there enough capacity to supply the entire slew of projects that we're seeing going live by day, Kolbjorn?
I think, first of all, I think it takes time to develop and construct all these initiatives. It doesn't come in one chunk. So I think it gives the feed producers and the farmers the time to do these developments. I'm not particularly worried for that. But I think it's an important focus point, what you mentioned, because if you look at the Norwegian salmon raised in sea and transported, harvested in Norway, transported, for instance, to Bologna or to Poland, 75 to 80% of the carbon footprint is related to the feed. So it's really important to dig into the feed diets and see what we can improve there, and it's also that's also part of our sort of design focus in the current phase.
Sylvia, since you're also launching new projects, what is your aspect on the feed element?
I think that you raise a critical point. A lot of the carbon footprint is the movement of the feed. And in conversations that we've had with all of the major feed producers, there's two aspects. Where are they going to locate their next facility? It's clearly, on everybody's mind. And the second is, what are the components of the feed, right? And looking at reducing, the FIFO factor and looking at alternative ingredients, which then allows them to, in fact, locate in different parts of the world, which is going to follow where the land-based facilities are going to be located. So I think that collaboration is going to be critical for the success of the land-based RAS industry. And I think that, based on my discussions, those feed companies are already in the design and development process to be able to meet that need.
Jordi, you again, I know that I've mentioned it before, but you've been there for quite a while. So how has that differed for you in terms of getting RAS-specific diets for Torbit and Sol?
Well, our diets were always land-based oriented and now recirculated oriented in the case of Sol. So this was for us always the case. I'm pretty much of the idea similar to what Sylvia is saying, that there has to be an evolution. Also, Kolbjorn said that not everything is going to change overnight, but I see lots of different companies and lots of different suppliers working in the same direction, and this will yield big results. So in our case, we are seeing improvement. We're seeing a decrease in the amount of fish meal or fish oil, for example, in our diets, and this is an unstoppable thing. I think it will continue. But I also, as Kolbjorn, I believe that working all of us in the same direction, this is going to be happening. So it's not anything different for us.
Sure. Let's shift the topic a bit and discuss markets and the consumers. So Ohad and Sylvia, you've both recently launched your products with retailers. So what's a consumer marketing message for a land-based product, and how do you justify the higher pricing? Like, also, if I want to elaborate that on that a bit, what trends do you see that might also drive those consumers to embrace the fish? Because typically they've shown that they don't care, and yet the premise still requires a premium. Sylvia, if you go first.
So I don't believe that premium pricing is sustainable. That's never been our business. It's not a part of our business plan. Because again, I don't think consumers, in my experience with other CPG companies, they don't pay for sustainability. It's an expectation. So yes, I think there may be a temporary period where, companies are able to achieve a premium, but as I said, I don't think it's sustainable. In terms of the marketing message, I think that it's twofold. It is the freshness factor, the quality factor, because of the logistics and the local, your ability to produce locally. And then I think it is also, and this has already been proven out, is the antibiotic-free message, that you're raising those fish in a biosecure environment. And that's going to become increasingly important when you think about microbial resistance globally. And so I think that that's going to be a message. But I think really it's, what consumers care about are affordability, quality, and your taste and your texture. And so that's what land-based really offers with the way that the farming occurs.
What about you, Ohad?
I think I agree on the, while we often feel we deserve a premium, we have not seen that as a strategy that's sustainable long-term and in high value volumes. That said, we did decide to focus on the highest value species we could comfortably farm in RAS. So the price point still justifies the effort on our side, and we're able to be price competitive compared to imports. As far as the message with retailers, we found it quite useful to work closely with the retailers and first share the 5 or 7 key selling points we think of internally. And since they understand and know their client best, they help us sort out the key messages that are most relevant to be on the forefront. We have noticed quite often that it's indeed the antibiotics-free part and the local in general that is a short, emotional, and direct way to reach the consumer. We did not find yet a retailer that was interested in describing the technicalities of RAS.
Kolbjorn, what do you think about pricing at a premium in the sense that it should also be cost competitive with conventional salmon farming, since you have more experience there?
I think in the long run, I completely agree that it's probably trending to a cost game, especially if you have a massive breakthrough in land-based farming, and land-based farming becomes a size of 1 to 2 million tons, let's say 15 years from now. In that case, it becomes a cost game. But in the start, we see, for instance, organic salmon, it's a niche. We see over many years, last 6, 7, 8 years, Norwegian salmon to the US, which is not a small segment. It's actually tens of thousands of tons, consistently achieving a premium of $2 above the average price. So we can see from different segments, also both small segments and larger segments, that segmentation is working, at least up to a certain point. So I think the important thing is that land-based will be a niche, and it will be hopefully a high-paying niche. It's sustainable, it's locally produced, and in a period where you really need a higher premium, because your cost is obviously higher in the start because you have fewer kilo to allocate your fixed costs. But then at least our calculation, and also the calculation we have seen from other projects, is that the projected cost is fully compatible, can fully compete with the traditional land-based farms. The recently published figures from the Norwegian side, published last week, shows that the average cost in Norway last year rose to 42.5 per kilo. Just back in 2011, it was 24. So yes, obviously there is the cost base on the OPEX side on the land-based. Most of the land-based projects fully scaled up is now fully compatible or can fully compete with traditional fish farming.
Great. So we're coming close to the end of this great discussion. So what I would like to do now is, if each of us would like to share final thoughts on what the key elements are to keeping land-based production from moving forward at a faster pace. Jordi, if you can go first.
I think the ones we already mentioned, having the necessary technical skills, controlling biological risks, and I believe what we need are successful stories. I think this industry will grow upon good news and successful stories from everything we're seeing around the world. So I think that those are the things that we're in need of today.
Ohad, what's your thoughts on that?
There's 2 elements I keep noticing when I hear, especially of new projects, and one is to have some respect to the complexity of the technology, meaning it looks very nice from day one to produce at full output on an Excel sheet, but we often liken it internally to operating a submarine or a spaceship. It's doable, but it shouldn't be taken lightly or taken for granted. And the second part that keeps popping up to my mind is there's often talk of product market fit, but it's the product market and technology fit. Yes, maybe technically any fish can be grown in RAS, or almost any fish and almost anywhere, but the right choice of which species in what markets is a key component of really building a sector around it, in my view.
Sylvia, let's move it on to you.
So obviously, I agree with both Jordi and Ohad. I think it is the combination of continued improvement in the technology itself, the RAS technology itself, coupled with the husbandry of the fish, because you're still raising a live being in that environment. So I think it's that combination, which speaks to the need to potentially look at different types of skill sets to be able to run those farms. And then I think it's also about how do we bring this to the consumer, in a very effective way with the right messaging, and it allows, again, consumption to grow. And I think that's really the opportunity here, is increasing consumption once we're out of, the temporary challenges of the pandemic. So it's the operational expertise, the animal husbandry, and then making sure that that messaging and that access to the consumer is there.
Thank you, Sylvia. Kolbjorn, the final thoughts for you.
I think the first three has summarized very well. I think, first of all, the fish is the risk. If you don't manage to bring up the fish for whatever reason, the rest falls apart. So that's a key element. I think history has shown that if you manage to produce fish, I don't think you should be too afraid of oversupply, simply because history has shown that if there comes fish, there comes market, there comes demand. So the industry has been very, very good at building demand parallel with building supply. So I think it boils down to two kind of risks. It's the risk of getting access to the right people / right locations in order to bring up the fish, and then of course financing, because it's a huge amount of money that should be raised to bring up, let's say, 1 million tons in 10 to 15 years from now. So I guess that's my conclusions.
Thank you, Kolbjorn, and thank you all the panelists for joining this panel. It's been a very insightful discussion. So right now we'll have a short 5-minute coffee break, and Drew will take over with the next panel on how private capital is driving seafood innovation. So make sure everyone stays here for the discussion. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is that we're covering this event on social media. So in case you're on Twitter or LinkedIn, just follow or look for the hashtag SeafoodInvestor20. Thank you again.